mendelspod.com, advancing life science research, connecting people and ideas.
Dr. Corey Goodman. He's a man of many talents. He's had an illustrious career in bio. He's been a scientist, he's been a professor, he's been an entrepreneur, a corporate executive, and now in his latest gig, he's an innovative investor at VenBio. So Dr. Goodman, I have to read my notes here, has been president of Pfizer's Biotherapeutics and Bioinnovation Center. He was co-founder of Exelixis and Renovis, and was professor at Stanford and UC Berkeley for over 20 years. He's now an adjunct professor at UCSF. Thank you for having us over.
Thanks for coming out to the ranch. It's a pleasure to have you guys out here. You get to see a part of my life. A part of my life not only where I live, but this is where I do a lot of my work, and I think it gives me a lot of my inspiration. I feel very comfortable here. And hope you guys get to see a bit of the ranch and the surrounding today. It's really a retreat from the rest of the world.
Today's show is sponsored by Assay Depot, the world's largest cloud-based research exchange for pharma. Assay Depot is sponsoring the Open Science Challenge. Submit your research plan to assaydepot.com for a chance to win $10,000.
So, Dr. Goodman, you've done about everything in bio. How did you come to the investor gig?
Okay, first, I hope you're going to call me Corey and not Dr. Goodman for this. Let me tell you how I got there. It's really been a natural evolution. First coming through, I'm a scientist at heart, coming through the academic world, wonderful 25 years. I mean, I'm always going to be that scientist. But now trying to look at how to translate those discoveries for human health and for society, and looking at it from the perspective of biotech, from the perspective of pharma. Now I'm trying to look at it from a bigger picture where I can be involved in more companies, helping to work with management teams, helping to work with the scientists in terms of moving ideas into the clinic and ultimately into helping patients. So for me, it's been a really natural evolution. But there's another part to it. VenBio, that four of us started, it's not a normal venture group. It's a new model. And you have to understand that model a little bit to understand why I evolved into it. I had been on the inside of pharma. I was on the executive team of Pfizer, trying to change the way they thought about R&D, the way they thought about drug development from the inside. That has its strengths and its weaknesses. Now I'm trying to make that sort of change from the outside. We have a wonderful relationship with both Amgen and Baxter and PPD. And let me just focus on Amgen and Baxter, two of the largest and most important biotech and biologics companies, trying to work with their senior management, with the people who run R&D, with the people who think about business development, strategy. We're not just a typical venture group investing in individual companies. We're looking at really strategic fit and trying to understand, what do these large companies, what does Amgen want? What does Baxter aspire to be? What are they thinking about? How can we help them as external eyes and ears, as people doing investments, not only with their money, but with their strategic goals in mind? So if you will, we're actually thinking in a broader way about how are these companies transforming themselves? Where are they going? How can we help them leverage what's happening in the biotech world to ultimately wind up with products, therapeutics, all new kinds of biologics that are going to really change the world and change healthcare.
And how's that going?
Well, these are early days.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
You have to understand, when I left Pfizer, and when the four of us teamed up, it's Kurt Von Emster, Paul Brook, Rob Edelman, and myself, when the four of us had this idea and said, we want to do something different. And that fits me. I love doing different things. Yeah. And I love it. My whole life, I've always loved it when someone says, you'll never be able to do that, or you can't do that, or that's too new a model. I mean, my wife has learned over the years the best way to get Corey to do something is to say, you can't do that. So in this case, what was wonderful, people said, well, Are pharma companies and big biotechs going to want to work with you this way? I mean, what makes you think this model is going to work?
So the model...
That just made Kurt and Rob and Paul and I think, that's great, let's go for it.
So the model is to work with bigger companies?
Yeah, here's the notion, is that...
What's new there?
Okay, you're probably aware that just as the pharma world is in trouble these days and the biotech world is in trouble, I mean, we're all in these worlds are all in a crisis. That's good. That's an opportunity for change. So the venture world is having big problems right now. There's some percentage, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the venture firms in the biotech world aren't going to be able to raise new funds. Some of them are having to morph and change. They're all good people. The problem is that the old model hasn't been working as well as one would hope. The notion that you're going to build companies, build it and they will come, thinking that we will make companies and that somehow they're going to get acquired or have an exit. Well, what makes you think that? Very few IPOs these days. So you really have to imagine the consumer of biotech are the pharma companies and the larger biotechs. And our thinking was simply, if the consumer is going to be the larger biotechs and the pharmas, why not work with them? Why not work directly with them? Get into their head. Do it as a collaboration. Do it as a strategic partnership so that when we make an investment, we really have a good sense that this is something, in our case, that either Amgen or Baxter, or with the help of PPD, with their expertise as a clinical CRO, that these are things we've talked to them about, that we have a real good sense of what are they looking for, where are they going. It's a very different kind of strategic partnership we have with them, and communication that goes both ways. So our notion was that what the venture world needed was a new kind of model of how an independent venture firm would work with larger established biotech companies and pharma companies. It's an experiment. I like doing experiments. I'm the scientist. I think the experiment is going to be incredibly successful. I think you'll see that not only will our model continue to really flourish and thrive, I bet other companies will come along that will do the same, because I think it's just natural. There's a lot of venture that's done from corporate venture these days. A lot of all the big pharmas and biotech companies have their own venture groups. That too can have its own limitations. We have the strengths of both models. We're on the outside, we're independent, we have our own network of sources. I'm not an Amgen employee, I'm not a Baxter employee, and yet we're intimately working with them, talking to them about what do we think, what do they think. Here it's the white space. Okay, Amgen or Baxter, you're doing this, but think about the future. What do you think about moving into this area? What do you think if we were to make this investment? Or Baxter, you want to go in this direction. What if we help you get there?
So invest directly in those big companies' R&D or their programs.
No,
you're not just talking to them about which small companies to invest in.
No, we're investing. No, we are. We're just investing in small companies, mostly private, although we can do public as well. We're looking at these opportunities really from the perspective of asking, what are the strategists going to think? Because the consumer is going to be these larger companies. What's Amgen going to think? Where does Baxter see itself going? Of course, I have insight from my experience. Where's Pfizer going? We have friends and contacts in all the other large companies, and we're trying to understand what sort of clinical data, what sort of endpoints, what are these people going to are these people going to look for in given disease areas or given orphan diseases? Where's the world going? We would like to get both strategic returns and financial returns, and we think the two go together, that we're going to do much better financially for our investors by the depth of our relationship and the intimacy of our relationship with these larger companies. We're also hopefully going to get them things that they want to acquire, things that they would like to partner with, that we're able to make investments with their money in a way that's complementary to what they're doing on the inside. It's a win-win, and it's fun to trailblaze. It's fun to start a new model. The four of us are having a great time. We hatched the idea back in 2009. People said, "Oh, you won't be able to raise money. It's with the recession and the economy and ventures in trouble, and you can't do it. You have to go join an existing company." The four of us said, "No, we can do it." And And we've done it, and we're having
You've raised your first fund.
Right, we've raised 180 million. We've raised another 20 million in another small public fund. So we've raised 200 million altogether, and now we're getting down to the business of making investments.
So you mentioned that the pharma industry is really in crisis, and overall, what's your attitude about that? What's your attitude about where it's going?
Yeah, so the pharma industry clearly is in a crisis these days. Great people with a great distinguished history, and yet the model they've been working on clearly doesn't work. And they all know it. The CEOs, the boards, the management teams, they all know it. And the question is, which ones are going to be brave enough to make the kind of transformations that's going to be required to get them into the next generation of success? They all have drugs coming off patent. They all have incredibly unproductive R&D organizations. I mean, if you look at the latest numbers, you'll find that by and large, most of them are spending somewhere between $5 and $10 billion to make every new chemical entity that makes it out into the market. I mean, that's an astronomical number. Back when there was 1 billion, you could imagine how the model worked. When it becomes 5 to 10 billion, it's unsustainable. All you'd have to do is sit down with the CFOs of any of these large companies, and they'll tell you it's unsustainable. I mean, we can't afford that. And there are reasons why it doesn't work. And the question is, these companies are going to have to dramatically change. Now, they're all squeezing their R&D budgets and making their internal groups smaller. But it's more than just squeezing the budget. It's really thinking fundamentally about the culture, about how do you do it. It's look at the success stories. What made Genentech so successful? What makes some of the other biotechs that have come up so successful? There's something about the culture, about the size, about the way these R&D units are built. And so you've got to break down the barriers. You've got to not just get small, you have to change some of the kinds of leadership, some of the ways compensation is done, some of the ways that people are reinforced. You have to change the culture, really. Get small, think small, become very entrepreneurial. Now, I don't know who's going to do it. I make a hobby, if you will, out of not only talking to many of these people, but trying to understand with the CEOs, with the CFOs, with the heads of R&D, who is just trying to cope with the latest crisis and who's really thinking to the future. And I'm not going to name names. I have my own couple of favorites. I think the world is going to change. I don't know who's going to be left standing in 5 or 10 years, but the world in 10 years is going to look different than it does today. I would predict that some of the current large pharma companies will have really gone through dramatic changes where they're not going to look the same at all. Some may not exist in their present form, or they may be doing more generics and nutritional and consumer medicine. Some of them, I think, are going to be thriving and doing really well, and those are going to be the ones where the right CEOs and the right leadership teams and the right boards of directors have really taken those companies in what I think are bold directions, and those bold directions require major transformation. Well, I'm struck by most of the CEOs they know this. I'm not telling you anything that they don't know. They know the same numbers I do. When I sat inside Pfizer, we got all the numbers. We knew reality. Every one of these CEOs knows the reality. The question is, are they looking in the short term and simply saying, well, let's see, I'm going to be out of here in X number of years and I've just got to keep the share price up for a couple of years and pay some dividends? Are they thinking just their time, or are they thinking their legacy? Which one of them is brave enough and really is thinking long-term to saying, what I want to represent, I want to show with my company, and therefore for the rest of them, what true transformation means, what we really need to do with what we're doing internally, what we need to do externally. Everyone's kind of nibbling at these collaborations with academia and things. Many of those models are okay, but not so great. It's time to really get some new thinking, some new people. I think we're going to see some of them do it. And we can privately make our bets of which one. It's kind of a fun thing over a glass of wine to try to look at the present landscape of CEOs and management teams and ask yourself, Which one's going to go for it? Which one is going to really solve the problem?
So you mentioned that you did join Pfizer in 2007 to bring about some change there.
Yeah.
And then you left pretty soon in 2009. So what happened there?
Right. Let me tell you, I stayed in Pfizer for 2 years. In 2007, the company that I was CEO of, Renovis, a public company, was just in the process of being bought. It was acquired by Evotech. We had a little bit of an auction going on, and Evotech acquired the company. And I was in the middle of that process that summer. I knew we were going to come to fruition with the acquisition. At that point, I thought I was going into venture capital. I won't tell you which firm, but I already had a piece of paper and a contract. My board did. I hadn't signed anything, but my board knew what I was doing. I'm completely into transparency that way. When Jeff Kindler, the CEO at the time of Pfizer, came knocking on the door, and what he proposed to me was incredibly seductive. It was basically the opportunity. He said, Corey, come help change the world. Look at the position we're in. Right now, he said, Pfizer, and he wasn't just picking on his own company. He was basically telling me where the industry was. And he said, look, he said, we all have these patent cliffs coming up, or, we're going over the cliff. In the case of Pfizer, it was Lipitor, and after that, it'll be, Celebrex and Viagra. It's just on and on. These major drugs going over the cliff of the expiration of their patents. And he said, everyone's that way. And look at how unproductive. Look at how, in terms of our pipelines, for the, $7-8 billion a year we're spending, look at how little that we're really excited about coming forward. This model doesn't work. Can you build us a new model? And what he offered to me is he said, I want you, in terms of new ideas, new blood, I've done a lot of due diligence on you, would you come in and build us a Pfizer Genentech? And that was code for, could you take us in terms of biologics and biotherapeutics and all the new kinds of technologies? Could you build us a group, a very entrepreneurial group? But by the way, I can't give you 20 years to do it like it took Genentech to build up. Can you, over the course of some number of years, do something, and maybe we'll do it through some acquisitions, but can you do something that would be such an innovative entrepreneurial group that we would even consider spinning it out as a separate company that we would own a good chunk of, like Roche owned, a good chunk of Genentech before the final acquisition? And could you make us something that would really not only be incredibly productive with a whole new R&D model, different than anything else in pharma, but also set a standard and a goal where that can start to change even our own internal group, the way we do small molecules, the way we're making drugs. It was intoxicating. It was just it was an incredible opportunity. And he said, come change the world. Think of the impact and the legacy you'll have.
Other industries have done it. I mean, recently the car industry, GM brings in Bob Lutz.
Oh, this is exactly what I was thinking of, and what Jeff and I were talking about was look at other industries. Look at what's happened in the IT world, and look at the success and failures. Look at what the auto industry has done. Look at what the movie industry has done in terms of models. It used to be that the movie houses owned everything. They owned the actors and actresses and made everything from soup to nuts. They don't do that anymore. Now they simply have the money. They're the financiers. They do the distribution and the final production. And you've got the smaller filmmakers who are making the really impressive, innovative films. There are lots of models throughout industry for new models. And he said, let's do this new model. So it was incredibly exciting. And I went inside Pfizer to do this. Became president of the Biotherapeutics and Bioinnovation Center. Now I was there for 2 years. And one thing I asked him before I went in, I said, Jeff, you're about to go over the Lipitor cliff. I said, I've got to ask you a question before I accept the job. Are you planning to do another big acquisition in the scale of pharmacy and Warner Lambert and what's happened before at Pfizer? And I said, because if you are, that's going to be so disruptive, and that's going to take, that's just going to take years to fully integrate, and it's going to be very hard to do this small entrepreneurial model and to consider spinning out a whole new company, the Pfizer Genentech, whatever it's going to be called, if you're going to really have to do a big acquisition. And his answer to me, and by the way, and he was being quite truthful in what he believed, and I heard him say it to the company in general, that September and October of 2007, what he said is, no, I don't want to do that. Even if we no longer are the largest, he said, I want to plan for the future. I want to be able to plan a model that will have us emerge as the best and the strongest and the most exciting. It was really quite a bold vision he had, and so it was very exciting to go inside. Now, once I got inside, it was a tremendous opportunity. Great people. I'm still in touch, literally almost daily. Yesterday, I was talking to someone at Pfizer. The day before I was. I mean, there's some very long-lasting, permanent friendships and people who are fabulous scientists, pharmaceutical science, manufacturing, people in sales and marketing. I mean, it was tremendous for me. But a change took place. The company came to realize that it actually needed to do one of these big acquisitions. And the rest is history. Mm-hmm. Wyeth was acquired. And Wyeth was acquired, I think it was officially announced in, if memory serves me, February of 2009. By the time the Wyeth acquisition was announced, it was clear that any sense that we were going to be able to spin out and really build Pfizer Genentech really was going to be set back by many years, if ever. My division, instead of remaining the small, new model, very entrepreneurial, very independent, my division was going to be combined with a large part of Wyeth. Wyeth had a lot of biologics and biotherapeutics.
So just the reorganization was going to slow things down.
You have to understand, these reorganizations are enormous. You're taking a company of 85,000 employees, and now you're acquiring and combining a company of 50,000, and you're going to lay off 25,000. These are staggering numbers. I mean, suddenly you're in meetings and endless PowerPoint presentations about how to integrate, and the notion that, and by the way, you have to save billions upon billions of dollars, and the notion that you're going to still be able to maintain this group that is going to spin out as a separate company, it wasn't going to happen. And instead, my unit was going to be combined, and it has been combined with Wyeth. I was asked, did I want to run that? Did I want to move to New York and do it? It's actually wonderful. You're interviewing me on the ranch, and if you get to know my life here and my wife and the cheese operation and the world we've built for ourselves, you'll understand why I probably wasn't at this point in my life very anxious to move to 42nd Street. It's great people there. It's a wonderful place. My life is here. You see my life. This is where my roots are. And one thing I've learned, by the time you get to be 60 years old, you learn that it's really important to be grounded. It's really important to have your sense of place, your sense of who you are, what your personal life is, your professional life, how you mold those together. Here, I think I really excel. This is where I do my best work and my best thinking within this sort of environment. Suddenly take me and disrupt my personal life, move me to 42nd Street. Is my wife going? Is she staying? Are we, I mean, that's not the life I want. So it seemed to me that the best thing for me at that point was to say, Pfizer, congratulations, you're acquiring Wyeth. I wish you well. I love you. I have wonderful friends there. But the best thing for me was to come back to my roots. I wasn't going to move to 42nd Street. That wasn't my life. My life was to really try to build a new model and to suddenly oversee this integration of Wyeth and Pfizer. I don't think a single person on the executive team of Pfizer was surprised when I told them I was leaving. I think every one of them got to know me. I've got wonderful friends there. The current CEO, Ian Reed, is a good friend. I really admire him and think he's doing a great job, by the way. A lot of lasting friendships, but they knew that this was my life. And remember, when I was recruited to come in, I was told, you can build your unit, you can do everything focused in California, you don't have to come to New York much. That was about to change. At this point, and given I know who I am and I know what gets me excited in the morning when I get up, I know what I thrive doing, and I wasn't going to thrive suddenly moving to New York at that stage.
So what is it that excites you in the morning?
Yeah, so, well, many things.
Tell us about your life here.
Yeah, well, first, what excites me about what I'm doing now is that the degrees of the different kinds of science I'm able to be involved with. I mean, I love stimulation in terms of getting to think about new technologies, new data, ways of thinking about solving unmet medical needs. So first remember, I'm chair of 4 companies right now. If you put me on the board of a company, you get more than me as the business person on the board. You get me as effectively as chief scientific advisor of someone who's going to meet with the scientists, understand, recommend. Several of those companies I've even helped to co-found or I got involved with very early. So, I mean, and it's such a degree of different kinds of science, new ways of making biologics and biotherapeutics, ways of dealing with the microbiome and various problems of the gut, and so on.
This is your company, a new company, Second Genome.
Second Genome, and we can come back to that in a moment. So you asked what gets me excited. Those two. What we're doing with VenBio. I mean, obviously I can't tell you the different companies I'm thinking of investing in, but there's 3 or 4 right now, literally, that have me very excited. Now, you see there's a lot of Buddhism around you. I keep what I'll call good Buddhist detachment. I look at things, I don't fall in love. I look at things and I enjoy them. I like what they're doing. I dig in. Some days I learn things scientifically that say, I think this is going to be a drug. Another day I see a concern and I say, now I'm worried. I have a concern here. I don't get high highs and low lows. I try to keep steady, look at these things. But I would say today, there's 3 or 4 I'm really pretty excited about. My partner Kurt von Emster just invested in one a few weeks ago called Cytos, a small public company in Switzerland. That's a lot of fun, and that's going to have a big impact on asthma, I hope, using an approach with something with toll receptors. Toll receptors come from a gene called toll that was discovered in Drosophila. It was discovered in a lab right down the hall from where I was working at Berkeley. I mean, it's just the full cycle of my life. I look at any of these things and I can get very deep into the science. I understand the history of the science, but now I'm thinking about the medicine and ultimately about how does it affect patients. Can you do good? Can you do well? So I wake up in the morning. Every hour may be different. When you leave today, I'm probably going to be working on 2 or 3 different projects. They're all really interesting.
So when you look at the progression of your career, you feel like being the investor gives you more power, really, to make a difference.
I'm not sure. I don't look. You used a word that I wouldn't use. I don't think of life in terms of power, but I do think of life in terms of how to
enabling you.
Right, how to leverage my own abilities. If I'm happy and I feel really stimulated, then society's going to get the best for me. My partners, everyone around me is going to get the best. And so I hate being bored. And so I think of how to leverage, how to use what I've learned over the years. And I look at life in different stages. I've been blessed. I've been fortunate to be able to do different things. I realize that that's unusual. There's only one life. You know, and I like to tease some of my friends who are deeper into Buddhism. I say, well, even if you believe in reincarnation, you're going to also have to believe that you come back in the next life with a complete memory of this one, more than just recognizing the doji or whatever. If you think that you just have this one life, then why not keep building and using those experiences and living it to the fullest? Those 25 years I was an academic, incredible years. I wouldn't redo them for anything. I mean, it was a privilege to be a professor at Stanford and Berkeley. Incredible students, but you know, how many thousands of undergraduates did I train? And many of them are successful now, and they come, and it's fun when they come up and say, "Oh, I took your course back then." How many, graduate students, postdocs, even going through my lab, there were over 100 people. They're professors all over the world and doctors. They're doing all kinds of great stuff. I get vicarious pleasure from what they're doing. That was a wonderful time. We made amazing discoveries, and the question was I going to spend the rest of my life just going along that path? It was, in some ways, almost getting too predictable, too routine. I didn't want to become a university administrator. I admire them. It's a lot of fundraising. It's a whole separate discussion of the implications for your personal life. my wife and I work best and have a great life if I don't have to be spending every evening raising money from donors, which is what you have to do when you become a chancellor or president of a university. That, people said, well, that's what you'd be good at. Well, no, that's not what I want to do. It's not what Marcia wants to do. So each of these steps I view as a way of how to use my abilities and what I've learned to have a bigger impact.
So we were just talking, and you said you wouldn't use the word power. What's your issue with power?
Right. I mistrust people who view life or view what they want to do in terms of power. I mean, I think it's really how do you leverage your ability? How do you make a contribution? I guess it's just an ethical way I look at how I live and everything I'd like to do with my life. And I wouldn't define things. I just wouldn't use that word. I mean, I would think
you instead.
By your own abilities, you're given opportunities, and it's how are you going to take advantage of those opportunities and make the most. Life is a team sport. It's not a solo sport. And how can you work with people and encourage them and get them to really make the most of themselves? I really think of it more in terms of human interactions and accomplishments rather than power, because I think the problem is power corrupts. And I think this is a problem in all different kinds of organizations, whether it's corporations. I mean, you can see it in universities. You can see it everywhere where there's too much striving for something simply to be there and have what you're talking about, the quote power. I would like to think that you strive and that you accomplish and you do things for some other kind of good or motive and what you'd like to accomplish, and for your own satisfaction, that it isn't just that notion of power. I mean, it's something philosophical, but it actually is something deep. That word obviously touched me in a way that I wouldn't use it.
Yeah, because at VenBio, I mean, how would you describe sort of your place at VenBio and the opportunity? Would you call it opportunity?
Oh, it's a great opportunity. What the four of us
change?
Absolutely. It's a great opportunity for us to make change. The four of us came to this new model. We come from different backgrounds. I'm the nerd. I'm the scientist at heart. Rob Edelman is also a scientist, and he was actually a surgeon, a practicing orthopedic surgeon before he got into venture capital. Kurt von Emster comes from this wonderful finance background at Franklin Templeton and MPM, and Paul Brook was head of healthcare research at Morgan Stanley and built out their offices and then their whole enterprise in Asia. And he has this incredible background for 15 years. The four of us come together, and the goal, and as we bring other young people in, quite frankly, our motto was no assholes. We want to have an organization that works with people who respect one another, who work truly as partners, who bring different things to the table, listen to one another, and that's really the way I view the kind of culture I'd like to be working in.
So we're here at your ranch, which is just right near Tamales Bay. We can see it off there in the distance, which is just north of San Francisco. And we came here today. You've played the piano for us. You're a very rounded person. So how did you come to set up the ranch here?
Yeah, so I'll try to give you the short version. Friends know over a glass of wine. Of course, these stories can go on for hours. I'm a city kid. I grew up in Chicago. Ethnically, I'm an Ashkenaz Jew. Grew up with a family that was very oriented towards education, so obviously very proud of me when I went to Stanford. So how did I wind up on a ranch?
Just before, when you go back to Stanford, you had to make the choice of being a musician. You've played some wonderful jazz piano for us today. Between being a musician and a scientist.
Right.
I'm curious about that.
Yeah, let me tell you this. When I was growing up, I was interested in lots of things. I was interested in science, very interested in music, had interest in sports and other things. But in terms of music, that became a main interest. I started out, there was some classical training, there was music theory training, stride piano. I played in all sorts of groups. I played in rock groups, country groups, jazz groups, you name it. In fact, the fun story friends like to say is that our chick singer in our band in college at one point was Sigourney Weaver. And anyways, fun stories, and I'm still friends with all those old friends, the musicians I used to play with. I aspired to be a jazz piano player. And I came to a point when I was in college where I went through the following realization. I would listen to a great scientist give a talk, give a lecture. And I was audacious enough, whatever you want to say. I mean, I was nutty enough that I would hear a great scientist and I would say, I can do that. I could be that person. I could imagine. I feel comfortable in science, and I could really make a contribution there. Well, I then would go listen to Bill Evans. Bill Evans was my favorite jazz pianist, and before he died, I listened to him many times. And I would listen to Bill Evans play piano, and I had multiple feelings. I mean, it was amazing. It put me in a different place. But I also realized I cannot be Bill Evans.
Okay.
Whether my hands, that's right. Whether my hands have it in, I think maybe I live in a slightly delusional world. I think that maybe I could have been pretty good, but it would have required to become a Bill Evans. I needed to, in my early teens, to be playing piano 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and I didn't. When I play, people say, "Oh, Corey, that sounds great," and I think I'm able to use my ability for something that pleases me, and I think other people enjoy. But I know all the things my hands aren't doing. I know the things where I'm skipping from one place to another. When I hear someone like him, I mean, he's just orders of magnitude. He's so far beyond my plane.
Music is really a foreign, another language.
Yes.
And that's why you have to
And I love,
learn
and by the way,
soon.
there are a lot of scientists who really have hobbies in music. I mean, there's something interesting. I found there are quite a few keyboard players who, for example, are into Baroque music. I mean, there's interesting connections. All I'll say is that I know enough about that language to appreciate it and to know that I think I made the right choice. I think I became a better scientist than I would have been musician. So my musical gig, if you will, I wanted to have a Woody Allen gig. I always sort of thought, wouldn't it be fun to have some other musicians who are much better than I am, who I could play with? And I've got that actually out here. I've become friends with some incredible musicians out here, professional musicians, people who go off and tour in different bands, but they live out here and teach and record, and they like playing with me, and it's an honor. And they'll call me up, and I'll go appear at some little funky bar or restaurant, every month or a couple of months, and I get to just play some blues or honky-tonk or some jazz on standard tunes, and I'm just in heaven. It's just so fun to take me out of my intense science world and just get my right hand going. And my wife and friends will come, and you should come listen sometime.
I would love to.
Yeah.
I would love to. I'm wondering if you see any connection there between...
Well, for me, music has been, it's just another creative outlook. It's another creative outlet for me. It's a way I express myself. It's a way I relax. It's always been a really integral part of my life. And people who know me, when I was a graduate student, I mean, I was playing with a female jazz singer, and I was playing with another jazz bass player in different groups. There's always been this double life. When I was an undergraduate, I worked in Don Kennedy's lab at Stanford, and they were all just amused, and they'll all tell you stories if you talk to them, that Corey would be the nerd in the lab all day working, and then suddenly at 5 or 6 o'clock on a Friday, he'd run out because his band was performing somewhere that night. And everyone has always known there's this kind of double life to me. And I sort of now in my late 50s, now that I'm 60, it's reemerged again. And, I've got my little gig. If you Google me, you'll find some pictures. People have taken photos and posted them on the internet of me at my piano playing away.
So tell us about the ranch. Your wife makes cheese here.
Yeah, so
You've got sheep here, and she's up at the barn right now delivering lambs.
Delivering baby lambs, that's right. So getting into this ranch, as I said, I grew up in Chicago. I'm a city kid, Ashkenaz Jew. I lucked out. I fell in love with my wife, and I thought she was the most wonderful person in the world, and I never fully realized, to tell you the truth, that I was marrying into a family that had ranching and animals and food production and all this in their roots. It's very deep in her family. She's American, but she's Spanish Basque ethnically, through her father's lineage, and her father grew up on a very remote sheep ranch in Idaho. And it winds up, I came to realize this, and as she got older, just how deep those connections are and her closeness with her cousins. So when I suddenly spoke up at one point and said, well, let's take some of that Exelixis stock, let's take that hunk of paper and turn it into something for us for our future, I was thinking naively, well, let's just get a piece of land, build a house, and live. I want to be the hermit and just have my retreat and my isolation. She was thinking in a much bigger, broader way, and it wound up being this ranch. You notice it's not called the Goodman Ranch, it's called the Baranaga Ranch. You wouldn't name it after... Her family name is Baranaga. That's a Spanish Basque name.
Plus, it sounds somehow better for cheese. I don't know why.
Oh, thank you. That was my argument.
Nothing against Goodman.
She kept... Everything against Goodman. She kept saying that the ranch had to be called Baranaga Goodman or Goodman Baranaga. And we were having dinner at her parents' place. Her parents have a little vineyard in Sonoma now. And we were having dinner at her parents' place one night, and her father and I are incredibly close. And we got into this discussion again, and I looked at her father and I said, John, I said, are people going to be buying cheese and lambs from the Goodman Ranch or the Goodman Baranaga Ranch, or are they going to buy it from the Baranaga Ranch? And he said, well, Baranaga. And I said, I rest my case. You know, sweetie, your dad just admitted that's it. All the other ranches around here, by the way, many of them are Italian Swiss, and they've got names Giacomini, Respini, Barboni. Baranaga fits right in. Now, yes, how we get this place. It's 823 acres. It's 1.25 miles on the side. And after we did it, we turned a piece of paper. And by the way, to my friends I started Exelixis with, to Stelios, to Spiros, to Jerry, to George, all I say is thank you. And I've told all of them this is their place. You know, we'll put up a Greek monument here someday. To my friends I founded Exelixis with, and lots of others who helped build that company, this is what Marcia and I have built with our piece of it, if you will. And when we turned that piece of stock, and again, Stelios and company, thank you. When we turned that piece of stock into this place, the question became, what are we going to do? We don't want to be hobby ranchers. We don't want to just have a big piece of land. My wife and I believed we wanted to become real members of the agricultural community, to build a real sustainable agricultural enterprise. This, of course, is ground zero for organic food and for natural food and for feeding the Bay Area and Alice Waters and Chez Panisse. And what can you do that would make a difference, that you would be really a part of that environment? And my wife's tradition is sheep. She's Basque, it's sheep. We do have organic beef on this ranch that are owned by Bill Barboni. We lease out part of it, so it's nice to have organic beef here. But for the part of the ranch that we were going to oversee, it had to be sheep. And then her father said to her one day, well, you know, Marcia, what some of your relatives do back in Spain is they make cheese. And suddenly, so I forgot to tell you, my wife was Ron Evans' first graduate student. Then she was a postdoc with Richard Scheller. She's trained as a biochemist and molecular biologist before she became a journalist and whatnot. So when she switched careers, she said, well, I think I'll make cheese. To which a lot of her friends said, well, have you ever made cheese before? And she said, no, but I'll learn. She and I have a lot in common that way. Just as I keep making changes, she said, well, if you can change careers, I can change careers. So how are you going to learn how to make cheese? She studied with all the best cheesemakers of the world. She apprenticed. I mean, there was a year or two in there where I teased her. I said, either you've got lovers in all parts of the world, or it sounds like you're studying how to make cheese.
You really are serious about
That's right.
cheese.
Well, taste the cheese, and I think we got that one answered. She went off and she studied at the University of Vermont and apprenticed with cheesemakers. Let's see, in the Basque Country, on the French side of the Pyrenees, in Vermont, in California. I mean, she studied with many of the best. She has wonderful teachers and people she still turns to, and she's making her cheese. It's called Basari and Chiki, two Basque words. Her two cheeses she makes are very much in the tradition of the cheeses that come from the Basque part of the Pyrenees. Actually, a little bit more like just the French side. They're all Basque. They would tell you they're not French, they're not Spanish, they're Basque. From a village called Usoarate, and at least I'm not sure my palate can quite tell the difference, but great people who are great cheese connoisseurs and cheese tasters will tell you her cheese tastes like a certain region right at the Pyrenees on the French side. And so she's turned this place. I get vicarious pleasure. I help a bit, and we'll go over and look at the lambs, but clearly this is her ranch, and we're partners. Oh, by the way, I'm chairman of the board of the ranch, and it's the only board meeting I'm part of where I get given a martini for the board meeting, but that's another story. but this ranch, it's really her life, and the animals, the cheese. She's part of the whole food world, and what it now means is that I get invited to all these events with all the great chefs of the Bay Area and Northern California, and go to these events, and my name, as far as they know, I'm Mr. Baranaga, and I just tag along as the spouse, and I get to eat and drink and enjoy the food world of the Bay Area.
Well, Mr. Baranaga, Dr. Corey Goodman, partner at VenBio, which is a new model for life science funding. It's absolutely beautiful here. Thank you for having us over.
Thanks for coming out, and come again. you.